Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar and our speaker panel today. We are very pleased to have several folks from FEMA here today to share some really important information with you regarding assistance in Wayne and Washtenaw County concerning the flooding that happened back in June. Just a couple quick things. We do have closed captioning going on today. You can turn that on at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We also have interpreters, which will be spotlighted along with our speakers, and we have several speakers today. A couple things, please keep your microphones muted today. I can help with that if you need assistance. You can ask questions in the chat throughout the talk, but we will have a Q&A at the very end of our session today. So you'll be able to raise your hand and unmute and ask questions, okay? Anything else, you can put it in the chat and we can assist you. With that, I'm gonna hand it over to you, Rodney.
Awesome, okay, so my name is Rodney Garrett. I'm the Regional Disability Integration Specialist. Let me go ahead and throw my camera on as well. I'm an African-American male wearing a plaid green shirt in my hotel room, beautiful downtown Detroit. As I mentioned, I'm a Region 5 Disability Integration Advisor. I wear a few different hats. One of those is also the Regional Disability Integration Specialist. We're going to talk a little bit about the nuance between the two, give you some general overview on my position, some of the roles and responsibilities, and then we're going to provide some insight into programs and services available to disaster survivors here at Disaster Declaration 4607, Michigan, which is for Southeast Michigan, Wayne and Washtenaw County. Okay, so really quickly, disability integration and inclusion. What does that mean? I want to go through a few, throughout this slide, I want to talk about a few different terms as well as some of those roles and responsibilities, just so we're all working from the same page as we have this conversation. When communities integration at its simplest is when communities integrate the access and functional needs of children and adults with and without disabilities into all phases of community-wide emergency management. This helps strengthen their ability to prepare, protect against, respond to, and recover from and mitigate all hazards. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in actuality and when you see it live and direct. You know, the work that I'm doing as a disability integration advisor, some of the considerations around the disability community and access and functional needs are really supported by and built out through a variety of laws and policies and directives internal to FEMA as well as. So with that, and just for everybody, just make sure you guys are on mute. We'll hold all the questions to the end. This highlights a few of those laws. We have the Rehabilitation Act. I'm sure some of these you're familiar with, the ADA. But for example, FEMA Section 504 Disability Access Plan. That speaks to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and just goes more in detail into what that actually looks like for physical accessibility for survivors at a given disaster. And I actually just looked at my camera and noticed I'm really poorly backlit. I apologize that maybe might be able to turn a little bit, but nonetheless, we also have the Fair Housing Act, the Architectural Barriers Act, and then a few different directives internal to FEMA that guide our work as it relates to accessibility. So just wanted to highlight those. And I'd be extremely remiss if I didn't mention procurement, the Post-Katrina Emergency Reform Act, which created the Office of Disability Integration and Coordination. And the process for that was that act went into place after Hurricane Katrina response. And oftentimes, whether it's a catastrophic event or, you know, you fill in the blank, whatever the event may take place, and those human service, social services aren't maybe necessarily put at the forefront. Oftentimes there's laws and different policies and acts that come behind those lack of actions to really reinforce the needs and the opportunities for people with access and functional needs and the disability community. So procurement came along and created the director of ODIC's position. So you had an advisor to the FEMA administrator on all things disability related access and functional needs, right? The job was so well received, the outcomes were so beneficial to the agency that we created an Office of Disability Integration and Coordination housed out of our headquarters in Washington, D.C. Currently, the director of ODIC is Linda Mastandria. And so that office has two components to it. It has the policy procedure side, where they work on, obviously advising FEMA policy and programs. And they also have the cadre management side, which supports disability integration advisors like myself deployed across the nation to support disasters. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those roles and responsibilities. As we mentioned, ODIC, here's just kind of some high level responsibilities they have. A couple of things I'd like to highlight is, they provide technical assistance and advisory services, FEMA leadership. And then you see at the bottom, we speak to the Regional Disability Integration Specialist, which really works parallel and in collaboration with the efforts coming out of ODIC at the regional level. And so just to kind of break this down a little bit, you have FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C., and then you have FEMA regions. We have 10 FEMA regions across the nation. Michigan falls into Region 5, which has 6 states in it: Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. And yes, I had to count those on my hand, even though you can't see them. So Region 5, and every region has a regional disability integration specialist that operates at that regional level in a very similar function to the director of ODIC. And then it's a resource to the states, state agencies, Wayne State, Michigan Institute for Development of Disabilities, for example. So, we use the term access and functional needs, but we're using the term disability. They have a slightly different context, but are related, right? And so I just wanted to break those down for you, as I've mentioned the term several times, and I'm sure other speakers may refer to it as well. Just want to make sure we have a clear picture on what that is. And so the top two bullets really highlight it well. An individual who needs assistance due to any condition, temporary or permanent, which is one of those defining factors as it relates to an access and functional need versus disability, temporary and permanent, that limits their ability to take action. It's also important to note that most people with disabilities do not have acute medical care needs and maintain their health, safety, and independence in their home and community on a daily basis. So, for those within the community and outside, I just always like to highlight the fact that, someone who has a disability may or may not have an access and functional need. They may be able to go through their, normal activities of daily living without any assistance, any accommodations required. However, there's also people who may have access and functional needs late terms of stages of pregnancy, for example. There may be some mobility concerns. Someone who has limited English proficiency, that's an access and functional need. They're having, the need is with access to the communication, right? And so there's a variety of services and programs related to that. But so when we talk access and functional needs, that's a more broader than, when we're talking specifically as it relates to disability. So just like to highlight that and some of the difference there. Access, just to kind of really reiterate it, and this is the Department of Justice definition pulled from the ADA. So, just going back to where the terminology, the energy and effort comes from, it's often based off the laws and policies that are being provided to do the work. Whole community approach, going back to just some of that terminology we want to get the audience familiar with. And this is basically, obviously the slide breaks it down a little bit, the specifics of it, but how do we take universal design, not only implement it into our physical buildings, locations, but use universal design in our way of thinking, right? In our programs, in our policies, in our communication. If we make it so that everyone can access, whether it's a deliverable, a program, a site, whatever the case may be, that's how you really encompass that whole community approach. Similar to how we talk about all hazards, which is like, how do you put out processes, programs that regardless of what the hazard may be, whether it's a flood, whether it's a hurricane or earthquake, these processes will prove valid and beneficial. Similarly, we need to take that approach as it relates to accessibility to our programs, facilities, and services. The cycle of exclusion, I like this slide more when I'm presenting to emergency managers because it usually kind of has that light bulb moment. But this may, depending on people in the audience, this may be something that's reaffirming thoughts, or it may be something that's really articulating an experience. And so the cycle of exclusion, and this is a pretty straightforward example that we can see across the country, and is what we're working against, right? When we talk about that whole community approach. So a person with a disability has been to a community center before and knows it's not accessible. When that shelter is set up in the community center, which oftentimes they are, the person with a disability doesn't go. They're not going because they're assuming, hey, I've seen this site multiple times. I know they don't have a wheelchair ramp. I know they don't have XYZ accessible component, and so they don't show up. The inference for the emergency manager, or what the takeaway for them is, we don't see the need to make the building accessible because no one ever shows up with the need for accessibility. Now, obviously, it's a little egregious, but this is the thought process, and this is the systems that we have to work against, right? That cycle of exclusion. And so we're doing that through a variety of ways, obviously through positions like myself and the Civil Rights Advisor, as well as different program modifications and considerations throughout our other speakers will speak to as well. I mean, and just to go back to this really quick, this is a point to make, and I'll talk a little bit about when I talk about core advisory groups, but it's also some of the onus is on community members, agencies, and organizations that have a stake in working with people with access and functional needs to work to get educated on the processes of emergency management, but then also work with partners in different organizations to ensure that they are articulating and providing that subject matter expertise to these emergency managers so that we can really ensure the right voices are at the table and are articulating those needs and wants of the community. So and I feel like I honestly didn't even plan to present, and now I feel like I'm getting a little long-winded. So I apologize about that. Really quickly, my role is a regional disability integration specialist. So we advise and provide technical assistance to FEMA staff. It can look a variety of ways. Every program is slightly different, and emergency response is such a broad field that it can look like different things on different days. Outreach and community engagement, similar to this event, making sure that we engage members of the public and those providers that engage with members of the public to not only improve on that situational awareness, educate and provide that facilitation and coordination around the emergency management processes in a given state, county, region, but also just to really get organizations out of those silos, right? And these advocates and champions out of silos where, for example, in the state of Michigan, there's a variety of initiatives going on that may benefit the state of Ohio, but because there's not that conduit for conversation or facilitation, these efforts are ongoing in silos. So I work to make sure we pull folks into, that coordination and facilitation arena. Talked a little bit about bringing emergency managers and the community leaders together as partners, and then disaster deployment, which is what I'm doing currently. So that regional disability integration specialist position is attached to our regional office, and then the disability integration advisor position is attached to headquarters. I hope that's not too confusing, but yeah, that's kind of the two hats that I wear. And so on disaster deployments, I, in essence, report to headquarters. And then core advisory group support is just working with agencies and organizations that are looking to, have some impact on emergency management and disability integration, and ensuring that they have whatever resources, technical assistance, and opportunities to engage with emergency managers that they need. And with that, here's my contact information. We'll be sure to blast this out after the meeting as well. But my name's Rodney Garrett, phone number 202-704-5429. And my email is Rodney, R-O-D-N-E-Y, .Garrett, G-A-R-R-O-T-T, @FEMA.dhs.gov. I appreciate your time. Looking forward to some great presentations. We'll hold the questions till the end. I'm sure we have some. And with that, I want to pass to Melissa Malone. She's going to be speaking on FEMA individual assistance. And let me stop my video, mute myself, and Melissa, you'll probably have to share your screen for your PowerPoint.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Malone. I am an African-American female, and I have a disability. So we're going to begin. Initially, when a disaster begins, it starts off with the local emergency managers contacting the state emergency managers and advising them that there's a disaster. If it's a huge magnitude, the state will refer to FEMA for assistance because the state can't handle that particular disaster. So they ask for assistance. But before the president declares the disaster and the state asks for help, the governor asks for help, and the president declares a disaster, the first people to put boots on the ground will be the volunteer agencies and mass care. So with the volunteer agencies and mass care, that would consist of Red Cross, shelters, food, nonprofit organizations, medical needs, and things of that nature. So they're on the ground. The state ever comes on the ground to ensure that the support is there for the residents. So after that, insurance. People who have insurance, they contact their insurance first. The insurance is the first mechanism to ensure that people are safe, sanitary, and functional. An insurance job is to make those residents, people, or applicants to become whole, meaning FEMA ensures that you're safe, sanitary, and functional. Insurance makes you how you were pre-disaster, okay? So you first apply with your insurance, your homeowners or your renters insurance. You let them know, my house has been destroyed, or I need some form of assistance. I need some repairs done, or whatever is going on. Okay, so if you're sometimes insurance, you may not have the coverage. Even though you do have insurance, you may not have the coverage or the endorsements or underwriting added to your insurance. So in those circumstances, you reach out to FEMA for assistance, Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. So with FEMA, I work for the Individual Assistance Program. I'm a task force lead for that area. And so we have different sections in individual assistance. We have housing assistance, and we have other needs assistance called ONA. So access and functional needs is a section that's in the individual assistance program area. And so we're going to go to housing, FEMA assistance housing. So with FEMA assistance housing, FEMA has been called from your local emergency managements are involved, state emergency managements, they've gotten the governor involved. Now we're gonna go to, okay, it's a disaster, the disaster is declared. Okay, so people are registering for FEMA, okay, because their insurance, they're underinsured or they're not insured. So they're registering for FEMA assistance, okay? So FEMA housing assistance, we have different subgroups within that: lodging expense, reimbursements, rental, repairs, replacement assistance. The MLRP program, that's down the line, that's multi-lease rental. That's when, as opposed to having different, there's nowhere to rent, there's nowhere to live, and people can't rent. So that's when we bring different avenues in, like alternative housing. So FEMA may rent a whole apartment complex for people to stay there. So that's when FEMA has FEMA housing assistance. So this particular disaster, they are places for people to rent. So people are getting rental assistance. And the majority of the time is 2 months of rental assistance that's being provided. And the rental assistance it goes by HUD standards of fair market rent. So they look at the composition of how many people in a household, and that's how that's determined. So it's across the board, every state. So it's fair for everybody. Okay, so we discussed volunteer agencies, we've discussed insurance, we've discussed FEMA housing assistance. Now we're going to discuss non-SBA dependent items. Okay, so some of our non-SBA dependent items that Small Business Administration would be funeral, medical, dental, childcare, and other. And so for instance, if someone has funeral costs, it wouldn't go by their income or anything like that. If it was disaster related, then they would apply for FEMA. And once they apply for FEMA, then they can be assisted possibly once, if everything registers out, that it was a result of the disaster, okay? So with medical, a lot of times people lose durable medical equipment, they lose medication, glasses, all kinds of stuff that's medically related. So they advise us early on that they have a medical need. And if you have a medical need, then we route you to the section called Access Functional Needs, because FEMA is trying to make everyone safe, sanitary, and functional. And FEMA knows that this medical equipment is needed. Okay, so with the dental, for instance, sometimes people might have lost dentures, or a tree might have hit them in the mouth or something of that sort. They lost a tooth or retainer or something of that nature. And if that happens, then they make a claim with FEMA, and FEMA could possibly assist them if it's disaster related with that particular need. Sometimes childcare, your babysitter might have moved because her house was flooded, or the childcare facility could have been flooded and they have to go to a new childcare facility, and the childcare facility might cost more. That's when that would take place. Each state, in October of the fiscal year, each state decides how much they're going to pay for those allotted items. Okay, so now we're going to go down to SBA Income. Okay, so SBA is FEMA's partner. And of course, FEMA's grant program cannot cover all expenses. Therefore, we reach out to our partner, SBA. So when someone registers for FEMA assistance, they are placed in 2 categories: FIT or HAP. FIT, fail income test; HAP, habitability and personal property. So if they're FIT, they'll stay with FEMA for the grant assistance. If they're HAP, they have to apply for SBA in order to get their personal property, okay? And just because you register for SBA, that doesn't mean that you're gonna be assisted by SBA, because if SBA, Small Business Administration, denies you, you're gonna be routed back to FEMA for further assistance and receive possible grant assistance from us. But if you don't apply for Small Business Administration, if you're routed to that category, then you won't know that you could possibly receive grant assistance from FEMA, okay? So SBA Income evaluation, repayment capability to determine if the applicant can qualify for a low interest SBA loan. The applicant must complete the SBA loan application and be denied for a loan to be eligible for further FEMA assistance. Okay, so I'm going to move down. So the next one is SBA Referral. for SBA dependent items and those applicants who qualify for a low interest loan. So that's a little piece pertaining to SBA. And then they discuss FEMA state owner SBA dependent items, and some of SBA dependent items would be personal property, transportation, moving and storage, group flood insurance policy. Okay, and before I go back to access and functional needs, I will discuss unmet needs, volunteer agencies, okay? So with our access functional needs program, in this section, this area, we cover everything from top to bottom. You will be assigned a caseworker. They will reach out to our volunteer agencies, our disability integration team. That's the DIA team that's Mr. Rodney's a part of. And we will do, we take the whole community approach and we wrap services around to ensure that the applicants receive the proper care and everything they needed or everything they had pre-disaster. So basically unmet needs could be glasses, could be if the person that sat with you, if they've moved out the area, we give resources. We assist with documentation needed. We advise you of what's needed in order to progress with your anything that, if you receive a letter from FEMA, if you need assistance in us reading the letter to you, we make calls to you. We refer you to services that could assist you. Anything that's needed to help you progress back to where you were, we do that. I will give the floor back to Mr. Rodney. I will take questions in the end. Again, my name is Melissa Malone. I work for the Individual Housing Program with FEMA. I'm a task force lead. And today I've talked about access functional needs and the services that we provide for people who may have access functional needs. Thank you so much today.
All right, Melissa, appreciate that comprehensive overview of individual assistance. As you can see, a lot of moving pieces, and that's just one program area. Let's pass and continue into the brief outs with Roberto Baltodano. Butchering your last name, Roberto, apologies. Baltodano with the SBA, Small Business Administration. The floor is yours.
You got it right. And thank you so much. And I'm gonna start by saying thank you, Brenda, because I know you're from Miami-Dade, and so I appreciate you being on board. It is important to have the help of all individuals, the whole community approach when we have disasters. And so the SBA was created in the 1950s to assist Americans in reaching the American dream of owning a small business. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to share a short presentation to explain how the SBA comes to help Americans, small businesses, nonprofit organizations, homeowners, and renters when disaster strikes. So allow me to share my screen, and I will get on to that presentation. Okay. So as I said, the SBA is there to empower the American dream of owning a small business. When disaster strikes, the Office of Disaster Assistance at the Small Business Administration, the SBA, provides affordable, long-term, low-interest disaster loans to businesses of all sizes, private nonprofit organizations, homeowners, and renters, for them to be able to repair or replace real estate, personal property, machinery, and equipment, inventory, and business assets that have been damaged or destroyed in the declared disaster. And so we are there to be able to help you on the long-term recovery road. So it is important to highlight that because you know FEMA is there to help you with those immediate needs to make your home safe and livable. And so we are there to pick up where FEMA leaves off, when your insurance leaves off, and complete that picture towards the long-term recovery road. And how do we do that? By providing disaster recovery loans, physical property damage and or economic injury, depending on whether you are a business or an individual, homeowner and or renter. Very important to highlight that for these disasters, which is the late June severe storms and flooding that affected Southeast Michigan, there is, from an SBA perspective, a geographical limitation in terms of where you need to be in order to apply. The primary counties for this disaster are Washtenaw and Wayne counties in Michigan, which are both eligible for physical property damage or economic injury disaster loans from the SBA. And I will explain in detail what each of these two loan products are. Adjacent counties, in essence, any county that touches Washtenaw and or Wayne County, listed at the bottom of that screen, Jackson, Lenawee, Livingston, Macomb, Monroe, and Oakland in Michigan are eligible only for the economic injury disaster loan, which is in essence working capital for small businesses. Very critical to highlight that there are deadlines associated. We share one with FEMA, which is September the 13th, 2021, literally a few weeks away. For SBA, that is the deadline for you to submit physical property damage loan applications. April the 15th, tax day next year, is for when you need to submit the economic injury disaster loan before that deadline, okay? This is a loan comparison chart that will help you identify or become familiar rather with the two types of loans that we have to offer. Again, you have physical property damage, and we have two sets of applicants, the business community and individuals being homeowners and renters. And so first I'm going to address the business community. If you are a business and or profit organization and you suffer damages to your structural building, you can apply for a physical property damage loan for up to $2 million to be able to repair or replace real estate, equipment, furniture, etc. Anything that you may have had in that business that may have been destroyed. We understand this was mainly a flood event in the basements. And so we know that there may be small businesses who were storing inventory of those basements. If that is the case, you can repair the basement, and then you can take advantage of the next product, which is the economic injury disaster loan, working capital. That is for small businesses and private nonprofit organizations, for you to be able to meet those obligations that you're unable to meet today as a result of the disaster. For example, buy that inventory that was damaged, or pay the leasing on your building, your payroll, leasing on equipment, whether it was production equipment or vehicles in which you transported that inventory over to your customers. That is the type of economic loss that you may have suffered as a consequence of this disaster. I'm going to take a moment to speak to those businesses that are sitting on the counties that surround Washtenaw and Wayne. If you are a business that you're sitting on those counties and you were a supplier to a business who was or is in Washtenaw and Wayne, and you're suffering then the effects, which is the ripple effect in terms of your economic injury, you can apply for economic injury disaster loan. You can apply for up to $2 million for your business of physical damage and or economic injury. A combination of the two loans, you have a ceiling of up to $2 million for you to apply. And again, we encourage you to do so before the April the 15th deadline, which is 2022. Now I'll speak to homeowners and renters. Physical property damage is available for homeowners for you to repair or replace a primary residence to its pre-disaster condition. Again, we understand there's the majority of the damage occurred in basements. And so we are able to pick up where either your insurance and or FEMA left off. And that is what we refer to as that gap in terms of your recovery. Whatever assistance you were able to get through other sources, being FEMA, insurance, or any other source that you may have had, and you still need additional funding to complete those repairs, we are able to provide you with up to $200,000 for you to be able to complete that repair. That is how the SBA basically complements, if you will, those additional avenues in your recovery. By the same token, and here I'm going to speak now to homeowners and renters, you can apply for personal property damage, which is in essence contents. Anything you see around you in your home. If you're a renter, anything you can take with you when you move. You are able to repair or replace furniture, appliances, vehicles, and other personal property. And you qualify for up to $40,000 to be able to repair or replace those goods. If you're a homeowner, you could actually apply for up to $240,000, $200,000 for the physical property damage and $40,000 for the personal property damage. Now, whether you're a business and or individual with an approved SBA disaster loan, you qualify for, and we not only encourage you, we hope that you will be asking for mitigation funding. This is basically additional capital for you to be able to protect the property against future damage from similar disasters. What do we mean by that? Again, thinking of the basement and that furnace and that washer and dryer that may have been damaged. Was it elevated? If it wasn't, you can now elevate those assets as you replace them to make sure you protect them again against future damages from similar disasters. And we can give you up to 20% of the loan amount, whatever that loan amount is you're asking to borrow, for you to be able to mitigate. You can elevate the property. You can install the sump pump. And so again, we want you to think about what you can do now to protect your property going forward. And so we want you to rebuild stronger, and we hope that you'll be asking for mitigation funding if and when you're approved for a disaster loan. Now, this is an untraditional type of loan. These loans don't come through the banking system. They come straight to the Fed. And so because they are that kind of loan, we have a much degree of flexibility in terms of how we qualify you into the loan and how we are able to make it, and I spoke about affordable. One way to do so is by providing low interest rates that are fixed for the entirety of the loan term. And this is up to 30 years based upon your repayment ability. Interest loans are as low as 1.625% for homeowners and renters, 2.88% for businesses of all sizes, and 2% for nonprofit organizations. Damage loan. If you're a business, small agricultural cooperative, or nonprofit organization applying for the economic injury disaster loan, you have 2.88% for small businesses and small agricultural cooperatives, and 2% for nonprofit organizations. And again, the deadlines at the bottom of this slide are important to keep in mind. Going to the next slide, this is typically an area where applicants disqualify themselves. The first thing is, it's the loan. Why? Why should I get into debt in order to recover from a disaster? Well, I'll tell you why. And the first thing you need to keep in mind is you must be in a declared county, and we mentioned what those counties were: Washtenaw, Wayne, and any other county that touches Washtenaw and Wayne. And you have to have a credit history that is acceptable to SBA. And notice the language, acceptable. We understand that you may have put credit, you may have damage credit over the last few months, you may be in bankruptcy. We want you to apply for an SBA loan, not only because you will be maintaining the FEMA process alive, but because you may be eligible to this assistance regardless of your credit history. What we're going to look at is your ability to repay. So we want to make sure that you understand that, again, we have a level of flexibility to be able to work with you in getting into a disaster loan, should you be able to qualify and need a disaster loan. Very important to highlight the fact that only uninsured or otherwise uncompensated disaster-related losses will be deemed eligible by this declaration. What do we mean by that? Uncompensated disaster losses are those, for example, that you applied for FEMA, and or you submitted an insurance claim, and neither insurance or FEMA were able to cover those assets. For example, and again, bringing it down to this particular disaster, a basement. If you're a homeowner that invested into that basement into becoming a recreational room where you had a large screen TV, some nice furniture, and some of those things that we all have in our recreation rooms, and they were not either insured nor covered by FEMA, that's an uncompensated disaster loss. And those items, you can include them then as part of your application for a physical property damage with the SBA. Uninsured losses, I think the word speaks for itself. Anything you may have lost that is obviously not covered by insurance and obviously not covered by FEMA and or other resource is eligible for whether it is a physical property disaster loan or in the case of businesses, economic injury if you're looking at capital. Important highlight, secondary homes, vacation properties, personal pleasure boats, airplanes, recreational vehicles, and similar property is not eligible unless this is used for personal business. And so an example, if you're a homeowner, you're listening to us and you're also a landlord, that you have properties that you also rent. Your primary home will suffer damages and one or more of your rental properties suffer damages. You can apply for a physical property damage loan as a homeowner for your primary home, and you should apply as a homeowner for that rental property, so long you are able to prove to us that that property was used for business purposes. How so? By providing us a copy of a lease, by providing us a copy of a statement on a bank account where you show how your tenant was paying the rent. By the same token, think of your tenant. Your tenant can apply for a physical property damage to repair the contents. And again, renters is anything you can take with you, you can apply. That is how a property could qualify, in this case, if it's a secondary property, as a business purpose. So that is a common example. Now, applicants who have not complied with the terms of a previous SBA loan agreement may not be eligible. We are faced with COVID. We're still struggling to recover from COVID. And so there are many businesses and or individuals out there who may have COVID-related loan agreements with the SBA. If you're one of those and you have not been able to maintain that commitment, we still want you to apply for a disaster loan. We're going to speak with you as to what happened, what led you to that situation, and do our best to be able to work with you to get you into that disaster loan and help you recover. That is important for you to keep in mind, and we encourage you to apply for a disaster loan, even if you had or intended to apply to a COVID-related loan. Now, this includes borrowers who did not maintain flood and or hazard insurance. And on the next slide, we're going to talk about insurance. Collateral and insurance. If you're applying for a physical loan, loans under $25,000 do not normally require collateral. If you're applying for an economic injury disaster loan, an economic injury disaster loan over $25,000 will require collateral. And you're applying for both physical and or economic injury, that unsecured disaster loan cap is $50,000. Now, if you do not have collateral, and we're going to ask you to pledge what's available, but if you do not have collateral, that doesn't mean it's the end of the road. We're not going to decline any applicant for the lack of collateral, but we're going to require you to pledge it if available. That is something you should expect to be asked about, and it will be part of the conversation with your loan officer. And so understand how collateral works. Borrowers whose damage or collateral property is in a special flood hazard area will be required to purchase and maintain flood insurance. I'm preaching to the choir. You guys here in Southeast Michigan know very well the importance of having flood insurance. You've been hit time and time again. And so if you apply for an SBA loan, part of the SBA will come with a condition for you to purchase and maintain that insurance. In that event, we're going to ask for the coverage to be the lesser of one, either the total of the disaster loan, or the insurable value of the property, or the maximum insurance available. That is how we're going to equate, if you will, you purchasing flood insurance coverage. At the bottom of this slide, we have a website, floodsmart.gov. Even if you don't intend to apply for an SBA loan in which you're going to be required to purchase flood insurance, we want you to visit floodsmart.gov and find out how easy it is for you to purchase and maintain a flood insurance policy. This is a website that is part of a government subsidized program for you to be able to do that and be resilient for when the next disaster strikes. How we are an untraditional loan and how the SBA offers you a lifeline, if you will, in terms of financial assistance for you to be able to start your recovery. And I'm sure you've been asking yourself again, why? Why should I listen to this guy and get into a debt? Well, this is good debt. We offer low interest rates, no cost to apply, no closing costs. There are no costs associated. If any, the only cost associated with this process is the time it takes for you to complete the application. We offer flexible terms of up to 30 years. You may use these funds to pay for that insurance deductible. Funds are available even before your insurance is settled. So if you have filed for insurance and you're still waiting, do not wait. Apply for an SBA, register with FEMA, apply with SBA, because chances are we're going to disperse these funds before that insurance money kicks in, so you can start your recovery now, not later. You may be eligible for refinancing. If you're a business owner or homeowner and as part of these disaster, you want to consider refinancing, we can help on that. If you're a homeowner or a business owner, that's property that was damaged, and now the landlord or the owner basically explains to you that it's going to take quite some time to repair that property, and now you have to relocate your business, we can help with that. And so make sure that when you apply and you sit down and speak with a loan officer, you bring those factors to the table and let us know what your needs are, because there's many ways in which we can assist. You may apply for mitigation fund. We spoke about the importance of that, and we hope you do that. Most importantly, and I know my prior presenter mentioned it, if for one reason or another you're found unqualified for an SBA loan, we're going to refer you back to FEMA. A declination letter, whether it comes from FEMA and or SBA, is not the end of the road. It's actually the beginning of a conversation. So one thing we want you to do is read that letter completely. Make sure that you go on to that second or third paragraph, because in there, it is going to give you an action item for you to act on and respond. Typically, it is something that we're asking for additional information in order to reactivate your application. So simple as that. If for some reason then the SBA finds that you are unable to pay a loan and we cannot qualify you into a loan, we're going to refer you back to FEMA for them to provide assistance through other grants, such as the Other Needs Assistance Program. Most importantly, one of the key reasons that we want you to keep in mind when considering an SBA disaster loan is we give you 1.5 years from the moment you sign the promissory note to begin your payments. As with any obligation, obviously, if you take on an SBA loan, we want you to make sure that you pay your loan as soon as possible. But if you need that breathing space, you have 18 months, technically 17, because the 17th month you need to mail that first payment. But do know you have that 1.5 years before you make the first payment. And last but not least, you can apply. We ask you to register with FEMA, apply with SBA, and you should apply to keep that FEMA process alive, because at the end of the day, you don't have to take the process and we approve you for an amount, X amount. You can just turn around and walk away. No cost, no closing costs, no penalties whatsoever. However, that approval is going to stay alive for the next 6 months from the moment you were approved. If by any chance you decide within those 6 months, you change your mind and you decide, you know what, I'm going to take advantage of that approval and take the SBA money, within 6 months, you can come back and say, Robert, I need that money. And it'll be waiting there for you. When you take it, you can take it in segments or you can take it as a whole. Typically, we disperse it in $25,000 increments. But the key point here is when you apply, you don't have to take it, but you have 6 months to decide after that decision is made. So again, as you can see, these are very flexible, affordable, flexible, low interest disaster loans. We're only a click, phone call, or a visit away. So here it is how you can apply. You can visit disasterloan.sba.gov, apply via a secure website, very conveniently from your home or business, or you can come see us. We have a business recovery center in Dearborn Heights at the Caroline Kennedy Center, 24590 George Street in Dearborn Heights. There you have specialists that are going to walk you, whether you're a business and or individual, homeowner or renter, through the application process, answer any specific questions to your case you may have, and most importantly, encourage you to apply and guide you through any doubts you may have in the process. Keep in mind the deadlines. We have them at the bottom of the screen. You can also come see us at any of the disaster recovery centers that FEMA has. We're co-located with FEMA at any one of them. There's about 5 or 6 in the area, and there's a website at the bottom of this slide. We're going to put on the chat for you to be able to find the closest disaster recovery center to you. And so again, like I said at the beginning of this slide, we're only a click, a phone call, or a visit away. All you need to do is reach out and come to us. And so with this, we're going to touch bases quickly with the host to see if we still have time. I still have about 3 or 4 of the slides. So Mike, let me know if we have time. If not, I can stop here. The next slide basically paint a picture of what to expect after you apply.
I think you have a couple more minutes, yes.
All right, so I'll be brief on these then. In essence, once you click on submit on an application for the SBA, in case you missed the message, it's apply, apply, apply. You have 3 ways to do so: via website, on our phone, or coming to see us. Because it is a presidential declaration, you have to register with FEMA first. Once you submit that application, that complete package, including your credit and income information, is going to be reviewed. And here's the keyword: for completeness and eligibility. So we want to make sure that you reach out to us and understand what forms you need to submit if you're a business owner, and how you can make sure that you're eligible by asking us basically your personal, situation rather, so we can guide you through that application. Losses will be estimated. At this time, we're doing it remotely. We're working with local emergency managers to be able to verify then that application. An SBA loan officer is going to be assigned and is going to work with you in order to receive additional information and help you then reach to that loan determination. Once that loan determination occurs, which is typically within 2 to 3 weeks after receiving that completion package, we're going to send you loan closing documents for you to sign. This is a critical step in the process, because until you return those documents is when the process literally kicks in. That initial disbursement is made, which is typically 5 days following the receipt of that package. And then again, as I said, we're going to disperse in increments of $25,000. Last but not least, a case manager is going to be assigned for you to be able to maintain the loan conditions and adjust it, whether it is up or down, depending on any circumstances that may come ahead. One example: if you're doing physical repairs and you discover it later on that there were damages that were hidden and you didn't know, you can come back, and with that same approval, you can increase the loan amount. You don't need to start over. You simply give us a call, use that application number, and we're going to be able to adjust that loan, whether it is up or down, if you received insurance proceeds to pay it off. That's, again, how flexible this is. Last but not least, we have a promise for you, which is you should expect assistance, resource partners through the area, our SBA district office, your small business development centers, women business centers, and SCORE. These are partners that work with you on a day-to-day basis through the SBA. And during the disaster, they can help you reconstruct financial records, prepare financial statements, and or come up with self-forecasting, particularly for small business, for you to be able to complete that loan application at no cost. So again, we're only a phone call, click, or visit away. We hope you come see FEMA or SBA. And we're open up for questions. Thank you.
This is Rodney. Great brief, Roberto. I appreciate that information from the SBA, and obviously a crucial partner in the work that we do in emergency response. Next, we want to go to Kenneth Simpson with mitigation, FEMA mitigation, and he's going to talk a little bit about what all that entails and what that looks like here in Southeast Michigan. Kenneth, the floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Kenneth Simpson. I'm a hazard mitigation group supervisor. I'm from Fort Myers, Florida. Been with FEMA for 10 years. And on my team, we have Hazel Gales and Lisa Santos. Of course, we're working in Washington and Wayne counties. Typically, what we do is we provide agent outreach and also give information to customers, primarily in the DRCs, through speaker bureau events, and primarily through agent outreach. Right now, Hazel Gale and Lisa, they're in the field. They're going to contact approximately 3,000 agents, during the course, of this deployment. One thing that's going on, shall I say, one major item that's happening with us right now, as some of you have heard about, it's called Risk Rating 2.0. And what Risk Rating 2.0 is basically about is that over the years, it's been kind of inequitable as far as like the how flood policies, the pricing of flood policies. So in some areas, you may have someone like in, say, $1 million home paying roughly the same amount as someone in a $200,000 home. So anyways, there's been a huge outcry, from the public. So Risk Rating 2.0 is going to make it a little bit more equitable. In Wayne County specifically, to address this area, they're going to notice that the flood maps in Wayne County, they're going to change within the next coming weeks. And so you're going to find some areas of the county, it's going to have, going to go from maybe up to a 40% price decrease. However, we always tell all of our customers, if you will, please, don't base it on word of mouth or what your neighbor or your friend's going to say, because sometimes in the same neighborhood, you may find someone that lives directly either across the street from someone or right next door to someone, and their price may increase or even decrease. But we always tell again is that number one and most importantly, again, instead of trying to speak with someone else, go direct to the source, go direct to that agent. When you speak with that agent, he'll be able to actually pinpoint the location of your residence, and he will tell you exactly, again, as to whether your price is going to be increasing or whether your price is going to be decreasing. As far as outreach to the public, there's there's a difference between flood insurance and disaster insurance. I'll let the people in IA speak specifically about disaster assistance, but when it comes to disaster assistance, where it differs from flood insurance, with disaster assistance, based on what the FEMA hierarchy that they have on it, in this area, if I'm not mistaken, it's roughly like a $3,000 average payout. But when it comes to flood insurance, the customer has a choice. Customer can choose anywhere from $15,000 up to a maximum of $250,000, to insure their property. So it's quite a difference between, again, is that the small amount that FEMA is going to give you, just to make your home clean, sanitary, and safe, versus getting a full policy. Number one also is that when it comes to flood insurance, that is the quickest method by far, to recover from a flood event or a disaster event for that matter. I apologize that I wasn't able to locate the slide that I was looking for, but hopefully when the question and answer session comes about, hopefully I'll have it located for you by then. And that's it, pending any questions that anyone has.
Kenneth, appreciate that overview on mitigation. I'm sure we'll have some questions towards the end, and obviously we'll set aside some time for that slide as well. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Ann Robertson, one of my favorite people. I truly appreciate her perspective. I've worked with her on a few different, not only speaking engagements, but just the work of the voluntary agency liaisons and disability integration advisors, oftentimes similar to civil rights, are kindred spirits. And so if I was in my position, I'd probably be in hers. So with that, I want to pass to Ann from that voluntary agency perspective. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Rodney. That's very kind. I'm going to give us a PowerPoint break and just share with you some of what we do with the voluntary agency liaisons. Primarily, we liaise, we integrate, and we share to strengthen and empower communities to assist in disaster-related unmet needs. So how do we do that? Our emphasis really is on equity and the greatest need within the communities that we're serving after a disaster. So VALs are part of the individual assistance cadre, and a primary focus is to support the IA team with helping individuals and families. VALs are typically deployed immediately after the disaster, and one immediate focus is to identify any gaps in support for families, and with a particular focus on vulnerable communities. We try to rapidly identify any unmet needs for the elderly, children, or people with an access and functional need. This might be supporting by getting food, water, housing, or other services to those communities as quickly as possible. It could also mean connecting with special services such as translators, ASL interpreters, or other types of assistance to facilitate families with registering for FEMA. We collaborate. The way we do this work is we really collaborate within and outside of FEMA. So just within the past week, our VAL team has connected with hazard mitigation and also with IA, obviously a lot with IA. We have collaborated with a variety of different SBA, for example, to bring those resources to some of the community issues that we've been observing when we've been out in the community. We also connect with state and local resources, such as 211, United Way, community action agencies, extension services, and local universities and colleges. However, often these local resources are under such strain because they were also a part of the disaster and they need time to recover, just like the individual families and households do. When this happens, VALs reach out to the national voluntary organizations, such as the American Red Cross, the Salvation Army, United Methodist Committee on Disaster Relief, Islamic Relief, and others. Many of these organizations are part of a larger national structure called the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters, or what we often call NVOAD. This is a great resource that we rely on for every disaster. For example, in one deployment where I served, there was an apartment building that was home to many seniors, and the sustained water damage created a mold problem. For some residents in this building, this had been home for them for more than 20 years. All residents had to be moved and rehoused until repairs could be made, and they had to do it quickly. Imagine how difficult something like that could be for your loved one who is 75 years and older, and then multiply that by more than 40. It was very challenging, but we couldn't have done it successfully without enlisting the help of many of the faith-based groups, the local senior centers and housing, nonprofits, which are part of a long-term recovery group or LTRG, and their efforts really facilitated moving and storage, transportation for the elders while living in the temporary housing, meals, and a variety of other services. They also provided new furniture and assisting with moving back when their apartments were ready. The coordination of these nonprofits made a huge difference in the lives of these individuals and in our ability to serve them within the FEMA program. Another thing that VALs do is support the community capacity building for the recovery process. We provide technical assistance for the development of community level long-term recovery groups, or what we call LTRGs. This is an evidence-based approach that encourages local organizations and agencies to collaborate, to share resources, and to address survivors' unmet needs. LTRGs form a structure that often varies based on their community needs and the cultural within the community, the variety of different organizations that are there. But it facilitates interagency communication and their ability to reach out and apply for resources within this new structure to recover and build resilience for the future. And that's a really important step towards preparedness. Almost any community that has had a disaster will likely have another one at some point in the future. So it's important that that preparedness piece is there, and the long-term recovery groups help with that. They can also define within their local context what they want to call a disaster. Maybe for this local community, a disaster could be a single family fire, where a household is lost and the family has to recover from that. And this local long-term recovery group can help with that process. It doesn't have to be a declared disaster for a long-term recovery group to respond and support. Long-term recovery groups typically include the faith-based groups in the community advocacy organizations, the Area Agency on Aging, healthcare consortiums, and others who are interested in supporting vulnerable groups and the overall community resiliency. Currently, for this disaster, we are involved in helping with find ways to address families' unmet needs. And for example, one example is we're developing a collaboration with Wayne State University School of Social Work. And their interns will help support casework for a lot of the folks in the community that have been very difficult to reach. I think it was mentioned earlier in the IA summary that one of the things IA staff will do is reach out and try to call people directly and try to help them with their application, give them that one-on-one attention. We're finding that many people will not answer their phone unless they know exactly who it is, or they struggle with that interaction that is not one-on-one. one of the ways we're trying to overcome this barrier is to work with local communities to help and assist with that one-on-one really support to bring that appeal, that FEMA appeal or that registration. And we're really excited about this collaboration with Wayne State School of Social Work. We currently have 3 VAL teams in the area working with the state VALs and local communities to provide technical assistance for the LTRG development. And we've been very encouraged to see the progress and really are pleased to be here to serve. I'm going to provide a link in the chat to the National VOED for those of you who are interested, and also paste in our VAL mission for those of you like Rodney who may be interested in the VAL work in the future. But thanks so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share more of what we do.
And appreciate that insight from the voluntary agency liaison perspective. Last but not least, I want to pass to Sherry Scott, our civil rights advisor for DR 4607. Sherry, the floor is yours. And then we'll have some closing comments and then open up for Q&A.
Thank you, Rodney. And I'll share my screen as well. Okay, my name is Sherry Scott, and I am from the Office of Equal Rights based out in Washington, D.C. This is my cadre. I operate out of Washington, D.C. as an operations research analyst in our human resource department. But when a disaster strikes, I take on another role, which is my secondary role as an emergency manager, and that title is a civil rights advisor. When we are deployed to a disaster, we basically are tasked with several different things, but one of the major things that we really focus on is a community assessment. When we first arrive to a disaster, to kind of assess the geographical area to see where our hotspots with regards to how to term it right, low income communities, people with LEP needs, our older population, and a variety of different things that we put in the community assessment. So basically, one of some of our objectives is to, and as you can see on the slides, I'm not going to read them all, I want to be brief, but this is some of the things that we identify when we arrive to a disaster. When the declaration comes out, we are responsible for identifying that's declared for IA. We look for those populations. So we were tasked with completing this community assessment in Washington County and Wayne County because they did have an IA declaration. Our job is to ensure equitable and impartial program delivery for all FEMA programs that falls under the Stafford Act. So we make sure that our state, local, tribal, and community organizations that falls under that's receiving any federal funding complies with our laws. We embed the analysis at our leadership levels to make decisions with regards to how we're going to locate different facilities such as disaster recovery centers. Those are the centers that you go in, you apply for assistance, or you complete the IA process for your application, or even drop-off centers. We know with COVID that we couldn't access some facilities, so we just had to create a location where survivors or residents impacted by the disaster were able to drop their documents off to. We work with many of the programs, areas that you heard speak today. We work with those program areas closely to make sure that they are in compliance and that they're delivering those resources, or, just, being mindful of some of the things that we look for from the Office of Equal Rights or Civil Rights Office. We participate in community events, town halls. We work with IHP, we work with HP to make sure environmental services are being, conducted or in compliance with our programs and our standards that we set at FEMA. And we are tasked now with the new executive order, which is Executive Order 13985, and that's advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. So that was one of the new ones that we are tasked with. So you'll hear a lot about equity, and that's what our job is, to ensure equity across all these programs through FEMA and your state, local, and tribal nations and partners. Our civil rights obligation, like I say, falls under the Stafford Act for both disaster assistance and programs to deliver relief organizations, prohibit discrimination on those, the basis of color, nationality, including limited English proficiency, sex, religion, age, disability, economic status when carrying out FEMA or FEMA-funded programs at a major disaster. And this includes the distribution of supplies, processing of applications, and other relief and assistance activities. So this is more about the Stafford Act and what that means. Basically, no geographical area can be precluded from receiving assistance solely by the virtue of the arithmetic formula or sliding scale based on income or population. We have to provide equitable distribution across all communities when we're at a disaster. The Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination based on, like I say, all those factors that receives federal funding assistance from our SLIT partners, which is our state, local, tribal, territorial partners. And then Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of disabilities in all programs and activities conducted by FEMA and other federal agencies and the recipients of FEMA funds. Populations with civil rights protections. These are your bases that falls under civil rights protections that we make sure that each of our program offices are in compliance with. So like I say, when we go to a disaster, we look for all the populations that falls under these civil rights protections to make sure that these protections are these populations are being reached, and that if they have a greater need, that just say, for instance, if you don't have access to a vehicle, we try to make sure that we place those disaster recovery centers within location to where you can, reach the facility. Now, crews of canvassing the neighborhoods. They're actually coming to residents. They're actually assisting people with iPads. They walk around with iPads. They assist people with applying for those benefits. So we try to find, like I say, find those hotspots that may have a need for those populations under the protected classes. And you'll see how we do that out in our community assessment. We provide accessibility protections for disabled disaster victims, accessibility issue concern for all disaster victims, especially related to individuals with disabilities. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which protects individuals with disabilities and discrimination to all programs receiving those federal funds. One of the things that we noticed with Michigan, we did find a population that I really didn't notice in other disasters. It was really prevalent to Wayne County. We did find Arab American population that was in Wayne County, and then American Pacific Islander community that was in Washtenaw County. So we try to look for those things that may, be an issue that comes up on the table. So we try to, advise on cultural etiquettes and diversity when we share our information. We pass out flyers, or if it's just a need for language barriers where we need to get an interpreter in, we look for those type of things at a disaster. And at the end, I will share, we usually have our common disaster flyers for civil rights for you to contact our office. So we normally share that in English and Spanish, but with the need for the Arabic community and the Chinese community, I had to get those flyers translated into those two particular languages. And I'll have those At the end, if you want to disperse those to your network, I do have all those flyers, civil rights flyers on who to contact if there is a need for it. The assessment data. So like I say, we look at the hot spots for natural disasters, tornadoes, disease outbreak. And like I say, I think Val said there are going to be more disasters, and hurricane season is just starting. So we know that a lot of those social vulnerabilities probably populate one of the most areas where you'll see severe damage and a lot of damage, where they have a higher need because they're prone to flooding. So we know Wayne County, just talking to disaster survivors, I think they were probably maybe on their third flood within a few years. So we know there's a high need for that. So just targeting those populations where we see that social vulnerability, that household composition with disability, housing type, transportation for those counties. So basically this map is taken from the CDC Social Vulnerability Index, and it basically identifies our hotspots. So if you look at the green map, the darker shades highlight a high need for the social economic status. So they're probably impacted. This population is probably impacted more economically and need more help. If you look at the disability map, you see the household composition and disability map. The darker shades of orange, there's a high need that we identified that community, that disabled community, or I'm sorry, the community with accessible needs in that darker shade of Wayne County and Washtenaw County. If you look at the race, ethnicity, and language, that deep dark purple identifies that community. That's the higher need. And then the housing type and transportation, the darker shades of blue, that identifies the higher need. So this is where we try to, place those DRCs, disaster recovery centers, or those DDCs, those drive-through centers in those high need areas where those residents or those impacted by the disaster have a harder time, getting those resources. Not everybody has access to a computer at home. Not everybody have access to a car. Not everybody has access to a phone. No, not everybody has access to a radio to maybe hear a lot of those things. We try to, put our, signs out. FEMA, if you're riding by, you'll see one of those disaster recovery centers in those high need areas. And that's for Washtenaw County. So you see, like I say, it's repeat for both counties. And like on this map, you can see where the DRCs, where we place the DRCs. This is a little bit outdated. We do have DRC number 6, but you'll see where our facilities are located, where we're providing individual assistance, which is in the shade of green. You'll see that there was a high need for Wayne County, where you see our DRCs are placed, the little green squares. So that's one of our jobs. You see the DDCs, and then you see where DSA crews are canvassing the neighborhoods, talking to those citizens that are impacted by the disaster with those high needs. And it's just kind of a bigger map. So basically what our civil rights indicators suggested after we completed our analysis is that both counties had a high need for disability, LEP, 65 and plus, below poverty, limited vision disability, and hearing disability. So we've identified all those indicators. And we provide recommendations based off our assessment to our leadership, to state partners, to the local partners, to tribal nations, to promote equity and ensure fair and equitable treatment of all disaster survivors and the members of the public in Michigan. And we recommend using this analysis to conduct outreach and engagement in counties and communities with high percentages of populations to protect and ensure FEMA and FEMA funded programs are accessible and available. We ensure FEMA is providing equal access to its programs taking into consideration the needs of people with disabilities, people with limited English proficiency, people with low income, older adults, and others. We establish ongoing relationships with community representatives who advocate for or provide services to the populations with civil rights protections to gain situational awareness. So sometimes people fall through the cracks and they'll reach out. Our information is online. We have flyers distributed through DRCs about what you can do if you feel like your civil rights were violated under the Stafford Act or during the disaster. You contact us. You can contact us by phone or you can contact us by email. We have an inbox. So we personally field those calls. And like I say, we have some people, we have a lot of people that's registering. Some people fall through the cracks. Our job is to make sure that whoever contacts our office, we can mitigate that and come to a resolution for all before it goes any further, because it may be something as a piece of information was missing. Somebody didn't submit something. So, there's a process that we go through to make sure that we are meeting those needs or filling those gaps that, are needed. And that's why we work with DIA. That's why we collaborate with the VALs to identify those, needs that, happens during a disaster. And then with the DRCs, DDCs, like I say, we identified those communities and we want to focus on those communities as well and make sure that we are providing resources to those communities that we've identified. We identify priorities for the Interagency Recovery Coordination Team, Public Assistance, Hazard Mitigation, Environmental Historic Preservation, the VALs, Individual Assistance, and DIA. So we collaborate on all ends to make sure that we are in compliance and fall under the legal jurisdiction of the Stafford Act, that we're providing those services in a fair and equitable manner. And let me end that. I just want to kind of show the flyers. And like I say, these flyers are available. So basically, this is the civil rights flyers that a copy can be emailed in Spanish and English. And then I do have Arabic and Chinese flyers that can be shared with your networks on who to contact if you believe that you've been discriminated based on those protected classes. This is the English. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll just send those. I can coordinate with Rodney and get those sent out. But we do have the flyers in 4 languages that you can share with your network. And pending any questions at the end, this concludes my presentation.
Sherry, greatly appreciated. Always value that perspective from the Office of Civil Rights. I think you did a great job really laying out the mission and some of those opportunities for collaboration there. So appreciate that. I know to Wayne State and everyone that ran point on the coordination and hosting, I know we're running a little behind on time for the Q&A piece. We got 1:29. So I'll save all the hot air and see if we have any questions. I know we have the captioner on till 1:45, so let's get that started.
If anyone has sorry, Rodney. Yep. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat really quick, or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
And just really quickly, while folks are thinking of any questions or putting them in the chat, this isn't the end-all be-all for questions or any follow-up. But I know the Wayne State team has my contact and everyone's contact information. So feel free to reach out in that way. This is also not a one-off event. We'll definitely be partnering with Wayne State moving forward, myself in my regional disability integration role, and the other partners on the call as well. So yeah, put that out there.
It doesn't appear we have any questions. I'm putting everyone's, all of our speakers' contact information into the chat right now for anyone who would like to copy that. A couple more. Okay, and like I mentioned, we have recorded today's session. We'll provide the recording on the MI-DDI website. We're also going to send it around. We'll make sure that everyone who is on today will have access to it. And we can also post many of the resources that folks mentioned today as well, along with the video. Help some of the links that were shared in the chat, some of the flyers, and the different resources that folks were sharing. So stay tuned for that. The last thing I'm going to put in the chat before we end is just a really brief evaluation, if folks wouldn't mind clicking that link. Just tell us what you thought today. And you also have the opportunity to sign up for the MI-DDI e-newsletter, which comes out quarterly. So if there aren't any questions, Rodney, thank you so much to all of our speakers. It was wonderful, lots of information. So those of you who are on today, please feel free to share this information. I know a lot of people could benefit from it. So thank you all again, and we'll catch up with you later on. Thank you so much. And to our interpreters and our closed caption typer, thank you all so much as well.